Welcome, everybody. We're really glad to have you here. This is our second community meeting for the fuels reduction work for this summer, 2025. On the call today, we have a number of folks joining us. I'm Claire Galloway from Whitebark Institute. We have a number of our Whitebark Institute team, and we also have folks from the Inyo National Forest and Mammoth Lakes Fire Department who will be joining in to talk about the work we have planned for this year. So, like I said, this is our second community meeting. We held one last night over at Forest Trail, and there will be another in-person meeting on May 19th. So next week at 5:30 near Red Fir. So if you would like more details on that, they are on our website, which we'll be sharing later on. I also invite folks to ask questions. Please put your questions in the chat. We will have time for questions at the end of the presentation. We'll have folks monitoring. So if you have questions throughout, go ahead and throw them in there, and we'll leave time at the end to answer them. So with that, I will welcome Janet Hatfield from Whitebark Institute to get us going.
Hi. Thanks, Claire. Hi, everyone. My name is Janet Hatfield. I'm the Forest Health Program Director at Whitebark and have been working on a pretty large project for the last 5 years. And I will start with saying that this is the second vegetation management project under the Inyo National Forest Land Management Plan, which was approved in 2019. And we work as an implementing and planning partner to the agency under their authority to help get more of this stewardship-related work accomplished on federal lands, first and foremost around communities, and then in other places of ecosystem importance. So I'll go to the next slide and we'll give an overview of our programming tonight. And this must be the smart group of people because some lunatics showed up last night in the snow and hung out for a better part of an hour. And it was quite chilly, so good decision making on your part. But we'll talk a little bit about why forest health work matters and really the political context that we find ourselves in the present day. And then the team is going to go into some of the details about the ESCCRP. We also locally, it's been regularly referred to and loved as the Mammoth Donut, and you'll see why in the maps as it completely encircles the town of Mammoth Lakes. In several miles in all directions. And it started as a circle, but now it's a little more thoughtful. And then we'll really dive into what the work we have planned for 2025 is and how it may impact you if you live in one of the neighboring residence tracks next to the work that's happening, because we're really starting as close to town as we possibly can. That was very intentional. And then there'll be a bit of programming about what you can do on your end at the parcel level to help make this whole effort a success. So I will start, and I don't know what the level of knowledge in the audience is, so bear with me. I'm not going to belabor like real ABCs here. But if there's things that need to be addressed, I want to leave time for that in the discussion. But let's just start really big picture and rewind about 100 years or plus or minus to look at why our forests are in the state that they're in. And this is a very oversimplified slide that basically tells a story of how we got to present day. So on the far left, you'll see a forest with a fairly clean forest floor. There's a nice large diameter tree you see in there, and there's some different age classes of trees that are look pretty happy. And then coming to the next slide, we see sort of what the slide is trying to show is some significant vegetative growth, both on the forest floor and into the forest canopy, which start to create a denser forest. And then if we scoot down the timeline a bit further, you see some of those trees starting to brown from stress of being too tightly compacted with their neighbors and in competition for resources with one another. And those trees are likely succumbing to drought or beetle infestations or some other pest or pathogen that's stressing those trees out beyond their capability to survive. And what unfortunately ends up happening is we are losing forests at an alarming rate to wildfire in ways that we have not seen, are not historic, across the landscape in very large numbers at a higher and higher frequency. So it's a less than ideal scenario, but really I feel like it's Mother Nature's way of telling us loud and clear there are far too many trees on the landscape. So next slide, please. And what better way to sort of describe that but in photos? And luckily, someone at the end of the 18th century took a nice snapshot of the valley. This is Yosemite Valley. I think most of us know this iconic photo here with Half Dome in the background. But if you're not familiar, Yosemite Valley, about 100 years apart. And I'll just point out that the 1994 picture, I'll date myself, that was 31 years ago. So if it can calculate in your brain at all, like we have 4 to 6, maybe even more times as many trees out on the landscape than would have historically been present. And there's a few reasons for that. But I think the fundamental reason that we have learned through science is that we neglected to understand as a society the importance that fire played on the landscape. And we also neglected to pay attention to the indigenous people who are here before us because they had learned this quite well. And they were using fire pretty extensively across the state, not in every location and certainly not every tribe. They all had very different relationships, but they learned to live in concert with fire and to use it and regard it as a tool and a beneficial tool at that to help propagate the plants that they relied on and the animals that sustained them in perpetuity. And in came colonial European Americans, and we had different ideas for this landscape. And there was a fair bit of felling of timber in the Industrial Revolution to build these towns. And we waged a war on wildfire, really not recognizing that it was the sort of ecological driver of forest health, and that we really made a misstep in that. And I think we're at the point now where there's so much fuel in so dense a forest that we're really not being very successful in suppression operations when those are the appropriate action to take, which is almost always around life and property, which is a lot of places in California. So we have a lot of debt to repay and a responsibility being residents of not only the Eastern Sierra, but the Sierra Nevada in general, to really try to understand our place in the natural processes that are really critical in these landscapes to get us out of the predicament that we're in. So I'll go ahead to the next slide and say one big risk of not doing anything. And I will say, my background is in conservation from Park Service for many, many years. And it is painful on occasion to have to go out and take such drastic measures, but we've really painted ourselves into a corner. And the photograph here sort of exemplifies what the outcomes are of no action. And this, it may look familiar to some of you if you've been over in the Reds Meadow Valley. This is a rainbow fire footprint scar of the fire that burned in the 90s and really gave Mammoth Lakes a scare back then. And it just goes to show how slow the recovery is from these high severity events and really what we lose by letting the forest get to an extreme where it burns in this manner. So not a great outcome for habitat for species, certainly not great for water retention and shading for snowpack. Lots of black carbon come out from these big events, and really we lose a lot of what we call, I'm going to air quote here, ecosystem services, which is a very fancy way of all the things that we often take for granted that these forests provide. So this is a good sort of snapshot of what those ecosystem services might be, and they're really difficult to quantify sometimes, but ones that often get overlooked is really the spiritual value we get from being out in a serene, peaceful forest. But all of the other pieces here. Recreation economy drives the local economy here. We all need clean air and water to breathe. And the carbon piece, as you probably saw in those first slides, those big trees are really our best bet for banking carbon, and we're losing those both to bugs and fire at really alarming rates, and that's not good news for the state of balance of the carbon game. So lots of value outside of the community itself, which is also a really big concern with the situation that we have, and it's going to take all of us to make this a success. So I want to make sure, and I was corrected very early on in a public meeting about this, is the forest health and fuel reduction work on the federal land is only one part of the equation here that's going to be the recipe for success for our communities. So we'll get to some of that other work at the parcel and community level a little bit later in the program. But next slide. So this is a little bit of the grim part. And I think it's fair to be really honest with folks, but right now in particular, California and forests across the nation have both been declared in a state of emergency by both federal and state governments. And it may be one of the few things that is agreed upon. But it is an absolute priority at both levels. And I think it's a real reality check of our decision to live here, and a real wake-up call to some of the events that have more recently happened, I think is why we're seeing all of these things converge. And I'll just call out the LA fires because there's a real close connection with Mammoth Lakes and the Southern California community. And I think we felt the pains of those fires fairly acutely, certainly not to the level that the neighboring communities and the community members themselves felt it, but there is a real connection between the two places. And we paid very close attention to what was happening in the LA community this winter. And I think why it's gained so much traction is that the price tag on the LA fires collectively to us as taxpayers is around the $200 billion mark. And we actually don't know what that number is yet, but it's not going to be cheap. And I think that's really catalyzed both state and federal officials to say, hey, enough in recovery dollars. It's far cheaper to invest in this work on the front end, and there are far better outcomes as a result of that. So there was both a state of emergency proclamation by Governor Newsom that is being rolled out as we speak, with some real regulatory implications to both Mammoth and Bishop, who have been sort of remapped at very high risk for wildfires. And Chief Tameyer and the folks from Mammoth Fire maybe can talk about that. And then from the federal side, we did get a secretarial memo from the Secretary of Agriculture that also remapped what's called emergency situation determination map, the ESD map. And the good news in that is we're actually on the map. And I don't mean good that we're in an emergency sitting, but it may open up some potential funding opportunities, which is not customary. We're typically left off the map in a lot of these big national mapping efforts. So that may be a bit of a silver lining, because federal funding has been challenging to come by because the data doesn't typically represent our area well. So with the federal memo, there's still a ton of support for vegetation management and wildfire work. It just has a little bit different slant, and we're really exploring how to utilize domestic markets to try to increase the value of the timber that is on the land when that is the appropriate method. But it certainly still supports all of the wildfire related work that's already planned and that we intend to do. So I can't underscore the importance of taking all this really seriously and everybody doing their part. And I guess I will turn it over to the next speaker in the program and just be available to answer any questions. I know that's very high level overview, but we'll get into some more details and have some time for a discussion after the other speakers. Thanks.
Thanks, Janet. Lisa, would love for you to talk from the Forest Service.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. My name is Lisa Cox. I'm the Public Affairs Officer for Inyo National Forest. Just here to represent and answer any questions for the forest that you might have. And of course, just want to, on behalf of the forest, express all the gratitude that we have for from the forest to Whitebark for helping us increase this pace and scale of reducing hazardous fuels and improving forest health within the Inyo National Forest and beyond to neighboring forests that we are adjacent to. They have many other projects going on with other forests, and it really is a huge landscape scale effort that goes beyond Mammoth Lakes. So this is the focus and the first phase of implementation, and it's super exciting to see this actually come to fruition and get to that implementation phase. And during this implementation phase, there is going to be other opportunities for the public to provide input. So just because we signed a decision notice and the plan is signed, doesn't mean that we are not open to hearing from the public in the future and our partners on how we can continually improve and adapt and take that adaptive approach to implementing this project. So if you ever do have those questions, you can reach out to either one of our organizations, and we're still kind of working out a way of how we want to formally do that. But in the meantime, my phone number and emails all over the place. You can always reach out to me or any of the ladies at the Whitebark Institute or our general inboxes. Our mutual goals in this project is, the big overarching one, which Janet's already referred to, is just increasing our resiliency. So we both have this major mutual goal of increasing our forest resiliency to catastrophic wildfire. So in doing that and doing these projects, we're creating space in that wildland urban interface area between the the more inside of the forest, so to speak, as opposed to the outer edges. And in that space, if we can reduce those fuels and restore and improve forest health there, we can actually provide a space for for firefighters to more safely engage with a fire, with direct firefighting tactics, should there be a wildfire in the area. So that's like the baseline. We need to get that done. And that's why right now we want to give an overview on, how we're going to be working in those areas and how it's going to be a minor disruption, right? Because there's going to be some heavy equipment and chainsaws going all the time. But the long-term goal of this is so critical in accomplishing that it's going to be worth it. So, and I also wanted to bring up, it's kind of a cool thing. I don't know if folks know this, but this project and this team, this planning team that wrote this environmental assessment for the ESCCRP won an award earlier this year in January. They won a forest reduction and forest resiliency award for the U.S. Forest Service Pacific Southwest Region Honor Awards. And I just wanted to bring that up because this is it's a very creative and very forward-thinking group of people who got together to get this done, even though our forest doesn't lie in a priority landscape under the Wildfire Crisis Strategy Program, which is changing names right now in the Forest Service, but our forest didn't fall within those priority areas. So having partners like this to step up and help us move forward and continue to move forward with what we had in our forest plan is just, very deserving of that award. And I just wanted to bring that up and, congratulate you guys now, because we didn't get to do a public announcement about it yet. But that's all I got. If anyone has any questions, don't hesitate to ask.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. I want to call on Mammoth Lakes Fire Department. I think we have Alish and Mike here with us tonight.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'll keep it fairly brief because you have a pretty concise presentation here. I'll just kind of go high level a little bit, and then I'll let Mike kind of speak on our programs. But just kind of alluding to what Janet was speaking on with we're trying to create resilient forests, but obviously we're looking at it from the lens of public safety. And for me, that's kind of the triangle for public safety includes that resilient landscape, some sort of response capacity, and then parcel level work that we all have to be a part of. I actually misspoke yesterday when we were out in the field. I think I was freezing, but we were looking at the rainbow fire. You saw it earlier in a few slides ago from the 1990s. We had 34 strike teams actually up here for that fire, which is 170 engines. And just to give you a little perspective, so this is an area it's relatively low in resource. The Forest Service has a couple engines kind of in our general area. Mammoth Fire has a first out engine with two or three people on it. And then we have, with the passage of Measure M, some fuels mitigations folks as well. But the reality is we're not going to get anywhere near 170 engines it would take for something like the Rainbow Fire, which ultimately leads us to the path that we have to go down, which is prevention to keep safe. So, um, Janet's 100% correct, not just on the resiliency side, but keeping everyone safe. And we don't really want to steal from this meeting. I think it's a great one. I will argue a little bit with Lisa that the reality is you can hear a little bit of chainsaws, but it's not too bad. And we do recognize that the donut has a center, right? And we have to make sure that we're doing the work on the inside as well, because obviously we could have a pristine forest around us. But if you really look at something like the Palisade Fire, once it was going, what you had was structure to structure spread, where essentially that fire is just hopping from building to building, regardless of the fuels that you have around it. So we've got quite a bit of work as a community to make sure we're filling the inside of that donut. And if Mike could speak a little bit kind of on efforts that we're taking kind of in a wildfire task force with the town of Mammoth Lakes and other partners and kind of resources that we have to support the community.
Yeah, sure. Mike McCarthy with Mammoth Fire. So as Alex talked about, we've stood up a seasonal crew now every summer, and they're trying to do um, fuels reduction work here in town in the sort of center of the donut that Janet has talked about. So they're trying to create the healthy forest around us. We're trying to focus on people hardening their homes and doing defensible space around their houses, as well as working on some strategic fire fuel breaks around the edge of town that would give us a better chance to make a stand and defend it before it reaches the structures. So you're going to see our crews out there this summer doing work, making those kind of fire breaks around the edges of town. And then we'll also be doing a lot more work with individual homeowners and trying to help them. We know you can't go from 0 to 100 in one day or 1 month. It's a daunting task if you look at it in whole about hardening our homes and making them more resilient and resistant to the fire and improving the space around our houses. So we're going to try to help do some evaluations on homes and give people a chance to get a little bit of a priority so they can see on what things they should work on first. Kind of tell what things will get the most bang for the buck and they can start improving it. And we know this is going to be a multi-year process. And that's consistent with the work being done around the forest too. But we're trying to strike while the iron's hot and get people to do work on their property close to their house and start with the little stuff that's easy to do before we tackle the bigger stuff. But that's the kind of key is that if we have a healthy forest around us and we make our homes more resilient to an inevitable fire that does cast embers towards us, that'll improve our chance of saving and protecting all the structures.
Great. Thank you, Mammoth Fire. Appreciate you. And we will talk a little bit more about the things that you can do to create that resilient space around your home later in this presentation. So thank you to our partners for chatting about their perspectives and their mutual goals that are achieved through this project. I want to spend a little bit of time framing the work that will be happening this summer. So we've talked a bit about the Eastern Sierra Climate and Communities Resilience Project. As Lisa mentioned, there's a larger effort going on that covers roughly 65,000 acres around town. The Reds Meadow work that happened last summer, that was part of that larger effort to address this issue of wildfire risk at a more landscape scale. So the map that you're seeing here is the area that was covered under the ESCCRP NEPA environmental analysis. And it covers roughly 58,000 acres. And you can see there in the center, that little donut hole, that is the town right there. So that analysis was completed just last year in 2024. There was public scoping, and there will be more opportunity for public scoping, as Lisa mentioned. And there was also a host of environmental surveys and analyses that were done under the SNEPA analysis. So that includes cultural surveys, wildlife surveys, water, hydrology, and botany. And all of those analysis are available online on the INYO's website if you are interested in taking a deeper dive into some of the work that was put in on the front end of planning this project. But yeah, you can see here that larger area, and then you can go over to the next slide. Thank you. And the real purpose of this, you've heard it a number of ways throughout this presentation, but it is to improve that community wildfire resilience, improve forest health and resistance. So that's resistance to pests and pathogens and further mortality that we're seeing in our forests, and overall resilience, or the ability to sort of adapt or bounce back from disruption. And then finally, one of the goals is to prepare the landscape for the reintroduction of beneficial fire. So ultimately, fire is a part of this landscape and fire will come through. So we just want to be able to be resilient to it and adapt to that natural cycle on the landscape. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk a bit about how we achieve those conditions. You can see this image here at the top. That's what a lot of our forests look like. It's really overgrown. And then that middle piece there, that's the fuels reduction work. And for a lot of folks, it can feel and look quite jarring. It's definitely different than what we're used to seeing on the landscape. But the ultimate goal is this really healthy forest that you see in this bottom little section there. And how we create those healthy forests is ultimately by reducing the competition among this overgrown, highly dense forest stand, so that the large resilience trees have more access to these nutrients, so more light, more water, so they can grow healthier and be able to be more adaptable to disturbance. It's also increasing stand biodiversity and tree species and removing the infested trees. So I'm going to go to the next slide and hand it over to Sarah Hoff-Phillips from Whitebark to talk a bit about the details for the work this summer.
Hi, everyone. I am Sarah Hoff. I am a project manager and forester with Whitebark Institute. So I'm here to talk about the details of the 2025 work that Whitebark has going on. I think one thing that's important to remind everybody is that there are other partners working on the landscape. So right now I'm here just to talk about the Whitebark scope of work. If questions come up about some of the other scope, definitely go ahead and throw them in the chat and we can see if we can answer. We have Courtney Rowe on with the forest this evening as well. She's a vegetation manager, so she can also help facilitate any of the questions that come up. We also have Melissa Boyd on, who is a silviculturalist with Whitebark. So either Courtney or Mel, feel free to jump in if I'm missing anything or you want to throw anything in. Also for anybody participating, if you have any questions specifically, since we're going over the whole scope of work of our treatments, definitely go ahead and throw them in the chat and then someone can just shout them out for me. So for 2025, we have two major types of treatments going on. One is going to be handwork, and that's a little bit different. So handwork is literally people out there with chainsaws cutting down the trees and then picking them up and then putting them into piles. So due to that, we have a smaller DBH cap on that. And DBH is diameter at breast height. So it's the diameter of the tree right here about at your shoulders. And so for the hand removal, it'll be live trees removed to 14 inches and then standing dead trees to 20. The reason for that difference is the standing dead trees to 20 inches tend to weigh a little bit less. So we can ask those hand crews to cut them and move them. The reason that we have handwork in certain areas is typically due to steep slopes, inaccessible areas, and you'll see that as I get into the map in the next slide. So we also have another type of units that we're calling mechanical units. That has larger machines in. It's usually flatter terrain where we can go in and we can remove trees up to 30-inch DBH. It's actually 29.9 for the NEPA document. So that's removal of live and dead trees to the 30-inch diameter at breast height cap. So one thing people ask about is, are you going to go out and mark the trees? We'll be able to see the trees they're going to remove. And what we're doing is called a prescription by description, or by designation. So what we do is we have a series of specifications that we send to the contractor, and it says, hey, so pick out the trees, certain species, and then that we want removed or we want retained based on the forest type. And then we also have, take out trees that have infestations or pathogens, bark beetle. So really picking out the healthiest trees. That is a little bit different than what we've done in what you'll see around in some areas where it's called an individual tree mark, where trees are actually marked individually going out. And the reason we do prescription by description and we don't mark is it allows for changing conditions from when we actually plan the work in the previous year to when we go ahead and implement. So I mentioned piling. So for the hand units, all the material will be piled and then burned 2 years later. The reason for that is with hand units, we can't get the material out of there. We have no means to get machinery to help get the material out. So everything will be piled and then burned within 2 years. The Inyo likes to have piles sit for 2 years prior to burning to let them dry out. And the piles are only burned when there's snow on the ground or there's just a little bit sticking out. So anticipated equipment, different from the mechanical units. Again, due to flat terrain, we can have feller bunchers, rubber tired skidders, forwarders in there to help increase productivity. So how fast we can move through the unit. And then in hand treatment units for this year, it'll just be chainsaws. So Heidi, if you want to go to the next slide. Great. So again, this is a map of the Whitebark 2025 planned units. So in red are our hand units. So we can see Forest Trail. That's where we had a community presentation last night. Forest Trail right here. I guess I'm pointing with my cursor. You can't actually see that. So we have Forest Trail. Then directly above that, Earthquake Dome and Misery West. So those are on each side of the scenic loop. Those are hand units as well. For the other hand units, if you want to go down Redford Bluff Street, so that's going to be unit behind those two streets. Panorama Dome, that is where the mountain bike trail goes through. We have some hand units above Coldwater Campground. And then one hand unit way over, it says Voorhees and it's in red. It's a pretty small area. It's actually an aspen restoration of about 9 acres. The mechanical units we have are also out at Voorhees. So that's actually right around the campground there, or sorry, around the Voorhees camp there at Sherwin Creek Trailhead. Coldwater Campground is another mechanical unit. Thank you. And that is actually in Coldwater Campground and then to the east of the campground. And then finally, we have a unit that we're calling Junkyard. So that one runs from basically Chair 2 or Chair 4 to Chair 2 north of the road, about 300 feet interior. So if you're driving past, you may not see us working in there. You might see some of it. It's about 300 feet in. Great. So if you want to go to the next slide. Cool. So for all of these units, we do go through what do we want to do on the landscape to achieve desired conditions? What do we want to tell the contractor to do? And then we also go through how does this impact the community? How does this impact recreation? And work through that. So for this year, you will see a series of forest order closures happening. And the reason for the forest order closures is to help our contractor so they don't have people just walking through. And it's also to protect the public. When they're moving through, the hand units will have approximately 20 to 30 people walking through the unit doing work. And it's really to help you and for them for safety. You do not want to be walking in the unit when we have people using chainsaws in there. So it's for everybody's safety. One thing I want to touch on is flagging. If you've been in and around Mammoth at all, we have started putting out flagging. It is blue or pink. There's reasons for this is that it marks boundaries and tells the contractors work within this area, and then we'll move them to the next area. And so it tells them what the unit that they bid on and the unit they'll be working in. Um, that's blue flagging for the boundaries. You may see some other colors out there. If you start seeing flagging, please do not remove it. We will remove it once we move out of that area. So as the units kind of close out, we'll go ahead and remove the flagging. For those who live on Forest Trail and Red Fir, any unit so that has a federal boundary and a private boundary had a survey grade land survey happen. And that was done with pink flagging. So what it does is it delineates between a private unit boundary and Forest Service. So we know definitely that we are not cutting trees on your private property. So you're going to see those ones specifically, they're stakes with pink flagging and blue flagging on them. Please do not remove them. So yeah, that is for the land survey to delineate that. Work schedules, I'll go into from Carl, mentioned that flag trees do not get cut. Sorry, Carl. Do you want to?
I just figured I would mention that anything with blue flagging on it is not actually going to be cut.
Correct. Yeah. Thanks, Carl. Great. So work schedules, I'm going to go through this in the next series of slides, but our crews work anywhere from 5 a.m., starting at 5 a.m. or 7 a.m., depending on location. And they'll work till approximately 1, 3, or 5 p.m. at night. We do have work occurring throughout the summer in these different areas, and we'll get into those specifications later. But one of the big reasons that we start really early in the morning, or our crews start really in the morning, is something called PALS. So PALS is a project activity level. It's similar to if you go and collect public fuel wood, how you call the line at the INYO and it says, yeah, you can cut today, or you can cut, but you have to shut down at 1, or there's no cutting at all. So we have the same sort of a call-in number. Ours is a few more levels in there, but it's based off of a Forest Service weather station, which basically says, how dry are our fuels? What's my anticipated weather? What do I think the temperature is going to, what is the temperature going to be? So how likely is it for a possibility of a fire? And that's what tells you really like if you have to shut down operations at 1 or you can't operate at all. So what happens with PALS is typically if we don't get monsoonal moisture, we get into more shutdown days later in the season. As we get towards August, September, fuels get drier and we have less possibility of operating. And so what we're really trying to do is get ahead of work as soon as possible in the morning and as soon as possible we can in the season to try to get ahead of those shutdown and before those fuels get really dry. So Heidi, if you want to go to the next slide. Great. So these series of slides are just going to go through each of our project areas in a little more depth. Again, if you have questions, please go ahead and reach out. So Forest Trail, it's a series of 3 units. So what we have here are dates, and I want to make pretty clear, these are anticipated dates. So our contractor has walked through these areas a bunch. They have determined how long they think it will take them to complete the work. But, sometimes things change, sometimes things take longer, or we get a bunch of shutdown days or adverse weather that changes our anticipated timeline. So we are really just trying to plan for it, knowing sometimes it'll change. And I will say our outreach and education team, community engagement team is doing great. We do have a blog that they're going to be updating regularly. So make sure to check back and they will be able to update as those dates change. So in Forest Trail, we are starting this Monday at 7 a.m. in Forest Trail. So those areas are directly adjacent to the houses. We will be complying with the Town of Mammoth Lakes noise ordinance and not starting before 7 a.m. Crews will start at, thank you, Claire. Crews will start at 7 a.m. and work Monday to Saturday. We will have a forest order closure. It's already been signed. We actually have people going out to put those signs up, I think, starting tomorrow. So those entire units throughout the work will have forest order closures. I know for the people that live there, it's their dog walking space. It's where they want to be walking in the afternoon. Again, the forest order closures are for your safety when they're operating chainsaws. All right, next slide. Misery West, this is also a hand treatment. So they'll go from forest, we're kind of showing the units in order right now. They'll go from Forest Trail to Misery West. Due to it being slightly more out of town, they will be allowed to work starting at 5 a.m. there. In some of the neighborhoods, maybe you'll hear a slight noise of the chainsaws, but it shouldn't be too bad. There will be a forest order closure in there again, and that will be for dispersed camping and roads within the units. All right, thank you. Earthquake Dome. So Earthquake Dome directly across from Misery West. Again, work will start, chainsaws can start at 5 a.m. there, working Monday through Saturdays. Sundays are allowable. Typically, the hand crews do not work on Sunday. They work really hard and they do take a day off, thankfully. This one is definitely interesting. These are really steep slopes. So again, these guys will be cutting trees up to 20 inches and then carrying them up and down slopes to make piles for burning. So great. Next slide. Panorama Dome. Panorama Dome, so it's the series of 3 units. If you can see the black line in the middle, sorry, I'm trying to explain the black line. So the one that runs a little bit more north to south, that is actually Panorama Dome Trail. So you can see, thank you. You can see it's directly in the middle of the units. We know this is a very popular trail and we are trying to get in there and out of there as fast as possible, knowing how popular it is, and get there before 4th of July. The work here will involve, because there is so much fuel built up there, this first year will actually just involve cutting of standing dead trees, and then material on the ground up to 20 inches. And then we'll have another treatment in about 2 years to go back and start trying to thin out some of the live material. So when we are working in this area, it will include a closure of the entire area and Panorama Dome Trail. We are working with Town of Mammoth Lakes. They're working on a reroute. There's going to be extensive signage and some social media posts to help direct how to reroute through there if you still want to go hiking or biking through that area. Cool. Redford Bluff Street. So again, this is directly behind people's houses. This is one that has a land survey, and you will see it out there that delineates the federal property and the private property with pink flagging. This unit should go pretty fast. We're just anticipating a few days of work there. The closure, there will be no forest order closure since there's really no trail in there. Again, if you want to ask questions, find me on Old Mammoth Road. You can say hi, but don't walk through there. We will have a closure on Old Mammoth Road for traffic control, and Town of Mammoth Lakes or Mammoth Lakes Fire District will be helping with that. Junkyard, again, this is one that has, not as many people walking through. This one we're expecting to run from about June 30th to October 15th. The reason that you're seeing such a long time frame just has to do with us in some areas not being able to start until after September in there. We will be starting at 5 a.m. in there. Sundays are allowable. For forest order closures in there, we are going to do a series of closures. So it'll probably be 2 closures that really just shut down all use within the unit since they're moving through there. And then in September or late August or early September, we will close Mountain View Bike Trail is on the northern part of this unit, and we will close Mountain View Bike Trail for about a week. We are coordinating with Town of Mammoth Lakes and Indian National Forest, and all of that will be signed, released on social media, and put out well in advance so you know when that's happening to make sure people can move to other trails as needed. And then we have this area of Voorhees. So this is Sherwin Lakes Trailhead, right on the left side of it. Voorhees Camp, if you're not familiar, is a special use permit in the National Forest. So we're working on 48 acres directly surrounding there. Sherwin Lakes Trailhead does go through this area, so we will have a forest order closure that shuts that trail after Labor Day. For probably about 2 weeks, where the exact dates are to be determined. And then we have this other unit to the right. This is a hand unit. It's an aspen restoration unit. Yeah, no trails that run through there, so no impact to recreation. And then Coldwater Campground. This is another one. We will not be starting here until after Labor Day on September 2nd due to recreation concerns. For all of you who have been up in Lakes Basin, know this is a super popular area. Duck Pass is a super popular area. The campground is. So we'll have a series of closures on this as well. And the reason I keep on saying series of closures is what we're really trying to do instead of closing the entire area when a contractor isn't working in the entire area. We're trying to allow for as much recreation to continue as possible. So we're like saying, hey, I'll take them like 2 weeks in one area. We're going to close that, still allow people to use the other area. And then when we move to the other area, we can close that down. And then open up another location within those units. So that's why I'm saying series of closures. It's really try to help as much recreation continue as possible safely. So the one thing to note in Coldwater Campground is this: we will have a closure on Duck Pass Trailhead for a few 2 to 3 weeks in there. Again, working with Town of Mammoth Lakes and the INYO, all of that will be well signed before it happens, and all your reroutes will be available. Next slide. And then these are just a few examples of before and after pictures. So this was work we did in 2022 at Sherwin Creek Campground. So this is actually, we should throw in another slide of what it looks like after the piles are burned. And I think that's where you can really see the change. But just in these slides, you can see how much dead and down woody debris was picked up and piled and then burned. And the next slide. Another example of before and after photos. This was also in Reds in 2022 work. This was a hand thin. As Claire said, trying to meet desired conditions. And I think one of the community engagement team really said it. And Bobby Tanner, when we worked down there, was actually the first person who came up to me, and we started doing the work in 2022. And he said, that after shot is what you want. The forests used to be see-through, and that's what they're supposed to be. Where you can actually see through the forest. That's the type of target that we're looking for in what we're trying to achieve in desired conditions. So that's all for me, unless people have questions.
Well, thanks, Sarah. We can go on to the next slide, and I'm going to invite Crystal Medhurst from Whitebark to talk a little bit about what you can do.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Yeah, we've heard a lot about the collaborative efforts that are happening this summer to support healthy landscapes around Mammoth Lakes. But wildfire resilience is more than just protecting our forests and the forest health. It's more than just preventing accidental ignitions. It's really a community effort. So I just kind of want to dive into what we can do working from the home outward, and just how important it is to create that resilience on our own home. There's a lot of studies from post-wildfire that show that mitigation measures that we take can really improve the survivability of our home, both in the likelihood and the severity. So go ahead and do the next slide. So because Mammoth lives in the wildland-urban interface, that means that our town borders are right up against wild, undeveloped spaces, which are at the highest risk for wildfire. Mammoth Lakes has, low humidity, dry climate, gusty winds. So these are all higher potential for wildfire to reach our communities. When we think about the different types of exposure that we have in our home, I think a lot of us imagine that direct flame contact, like the wall of fire coming at us. But in reality, it's most often embers that create that home ignition and home loss. If you don't know what an ember is, it's basically a flying piece of burning debris, and it can carry on the wind miles ahead of a wildfire. The other exposure that we have is radiant heat. So that's why we talk about moving our wood piles away from our homes by 30 feet, if possible, or covering it with a tarp. This can also be sheds or an RV in your driveway. That radiant heat can actually create an ignition on your home if the heat is high enough and it's close enough. Next slide, please. So when we talk about defensible space, we're really talking about what we can do on our properties around our home to remove those ember catchment areas, to reduce the opportunity for radiant heat ignition, and to try to eliminate pathways for a direct flame to come to our homes. If we do this, it also provides a safer environment for our firefighters to work and help defend our homes. So the first zone is called Zone 0, or the ember resistant zone, and this should be your first priority to take a look at. It's that first 0, so from the wall of your structure to the 5 feet from your home. This area should be completely clear of combustible materials if possible. I know that sometimes it can be a little challenging, but everything that you can do to make those kind of moves are going to just increase your resilience the more that you can do that. So if you're thinking about planting, maybe plant outside of the 5 feet zone, and maybe, keep that first area of 5 feet free of patio furniture, your wood piles, maybe even that doormat, replacing that with, instead of a hay one, something that is non-combustible also. As we move out from 5 to 30 feet, that's called the clean, lean, and green zone. This is where you're going to really want to make sure that your vegetation is well maintained. You give it adequate spacing, both horizontally and vertically, so that you can kind of remove those ladder fuels that have it climb into the canopies of the trees. And if you have a home that has 30 feet or beyond, you're just going to have and continue to reduce that fuel to just prevent the fires coming closer to your home. So home hardening, this kind of refers to the materials that you can use to make your structure a little more fire resistant. Embers being the way that most homes ignite, it's really good to look and see where your vulnerabilities might be. Our vents are one major area that embers can penetrate. Right now, typically most homes have about a 1/4 inch mesh on their vents. The new standard is going to be 1/8 inch. You can easily retrofit by buying some 1/8 inch mesh to cover your vents. That's a simple and inexpensive method that you can use. If you have a roof that still has the wood shingles, then you might want to consider updating that to a Class A roof. Embers, when they come through in an ember storm, as they blow, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll hit the side of your home and then fall right into that zone between your siding and the ground. Often that's where our pine needles collect too, right? So you really want to make sure that area is clear. Other ember catchment areas can be the dormers of where your roof meets maybe a room that kind of comes out. So really think about where do your pine needles collect? And that might be where the embers are going to be collecting too. I also want to point out, not a lot of us have gutters, but if you do, keep those gutters clear, keep your roof clear. Pine needles can collect up there. If you have a fence, consider using a non-combustible gate attachment, so that way it eliminates that pathway for the fire to burn directly to your house. And we'll have a lot of these resources more examples of what you can do available on our website too. A few of the resources that we have locally are obviously Mammoth Fire Protection District. They might go into this a little bit later if you want to, but they have a chipping program. You can call them up and have a defensible space evaluation where they can help you understand how you can better create resilience on your property. They do have some green waste vouchers that can help you get rid of your woody debris. And then they have all sorts of lists of contractors and other resources on their site as well. One thing that we didn't go into a whole lot today was the fact that our town has bark beetle infestation, not only surrounding the town, but within the town as well. Southern California Edison has a hazard tree removal program where if you have a tree that you suspect might have a bark beetle infestation and it's near one of their power lines, you can call that number, they'll send an arborist out, and if they designate it a hazard tree, they'll remove it for free. Drought contributes to the wildfire severity, so Mammoth Community Water District has a turf replacement program. So if you wanted to remove that and replace it with some non-combustible rocks around your home, that would be a good opportunity for you to check out. And then whenever you can use California native plants, that is going to also help because they're just more drought tolerant. There are no fire safe plants. Everything is going to burn at some temperature, but there are some fire smart plants that are a little less flammable that you could choose to use too. And then we have a Firewise USA program. It's a national recognition program that has a collaborative framework that you can organize with your neighbors to create these little pockets of resilience within the community. It really gives you all the tools that you need to plan it, do it, and report it, and you can get nationally recognized for it. So just to reiterate, yes, real resilience is when we all take action together, not only in our forests, not only in prevention, but what we can do on our own properties too. So when we all take action to prepare, we do build a stronger, more connected, wildfire resilient community. I do want to also mention that this is Wildfire Resilience Month. We have a whole bunch of events within the community throughout the Eastern Sierra that have more information about how you can create more resilience in your community.
Thanks, Crystal. I will add this weekend there's an event in Mammoth. It's the Defensible Space and Community Cleanup Day. So from 9 to 12 at the Community Rec Center, there's going to be free disposal days and other incentives to get moving on your own property and creating resilience around your home. So we'd love to see you there. At this stage, I'd like to open it up to questions from folks. Wow, we covered everything, I guess.
That was very thorough.
Yeah. Thank you. Lisa, I know one of the common questions that you get is about getting wood off the landscape, and I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about that since that's a question that comes up often.
Yeah, sure. One of the most frequently asked questions we get when we announce hazardous fuel reduction projects is, can we go collect the wood? So the short answer is no, not yet. So typically we have, as you've seen in the presentation, there's a strategy to how the fuel would, or to how the wood and the fuel is gathered, collected, and piled or taken off site. It just depends on the ability for equipment to get in there, or the certain prescription for that landscape if we're planning to return fire in a prescribed fire manner a couple of years later after things cure. So there is a purpose and strategy behind leaving some of that stuff behind. But that's not to say that there isn't a ton of fuel that is going to be cut down and there's going to be a surplus of it, right? There's tons of fuel to be used. So when that does happen and there's like special log decks that come available, we'll open that up to the public. And we just did that last week. We put out an announcement for fuelwood collection to begin this Thursday, 15th. Yes, tomorrow. And there's actually 2 special collection areas right now off of the Scenic Loop and Dead Man Creek Road. And those were actually a result of past forest health projects that we collected and decked in an area so people could just go straight there. And it was technically outside of the fuelwood collection area map. But since it's a special fuelwood collection and it's designated as that, it's okay to do. You just have to have your fuelwood permit first before you can collect. And all of the locations where you're permitted to collect fuelwood is provided by maps on our website. And I will drop the website link in the chat for your convenience. But all of our maps are geo-referenced on Avenza. Avenza is a free app you can download to get free Forest Service maps in any forest in the country for motor vehicle use maps and also wood collection maps and things like that. The special fuelwood collection area off Mammoth, Scenic Loop, and Dead Man Creek Road, that map is also georeferenced, and you can download that or upload it to the Avenza app. So that's typically how we're going to do things moving forward with making the wood that is cut down in these project areas. We'll do an announcement for it, and we'll let you know where it is. Hope that covered it. If anyone has any further questions, feel free to jump in. Permits.
Thanks, Lisa. I see a question popped up in the chat. Alish, what services are available for helping to remove trees from private property in town?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we're getting to the point of where, some of these are very difficult things to do for homeowners, and that's where we really want to support kind of the lower hanging fruits and then start to work to some of these more challenging issues. A little bit on kind of what Chief McCarthy was alluding to earlier. We've gotten some support from the town of Mammoth Lakes to start up a wildfire task force, and it's going to be kind of a multi-phase approach, similar to kind of a prescription that you have for the land around us for the town. And the first part is getting those home evaluations out. So we have kind of an internal goal from that task force to get through and just go to every single property in town and give them an evaluation from the street that gives them an idea of which trees, what they should be doing as far as home hardening for their property. And our goal is to get through the whole town in 2 to 3 years on that. It's a little ambitious, but that's what we're shooting for. We already have an existing chipping program, which can take, if you cut down branches and do that sort of work, you leave those in the road, we will come and chip those up and remove them for you. Because we're moving to the new software, it's currently not up on our website. We want to have that up in the next few weeks, so you can sign up for that. And then our goal is to take that program and expand it beyond chipping. The first phase of that would be ladder fuel. So looking at your trees, and if you have any branches, they're kind of at the bottom so that you have fire spread kind of from the ground surface fuels up to the tree. And then assisting with a lot of those smaller trees first. Basically kind of at that breast diameter height, most likely about 12 inches because we can feed that directly into our chipper. Looking at a lot of those pictures that you saw, a significant part of the risk is coming from those smaller trees that we kind of let grow under the larger trees and have created some of those screens. And if we can get a lot of those out of the way, we'll be making really good progress. So unfortunately, the large trees are certainly a challenge. We have a list of contractors on our website that can do that sort of work, but we understand that it's challenging and it's usually not cheap. And that's really, if you're in a position to do that, we absolutely will support it. We are also working with the town to waive permit fees on any of that. So if we do a defensible space fireside inspection, we're working so the process, you can essentially use that inspection to let you do the work and waive the permit fees on it. So doing everything we can. Currently, those are the mechanisms that are in place. Hope that helps a little bit.
Great. Thanks, Alish. Any other questions out there? Okay. If you do end up having further questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm going to drop the link to our website here once more, where we'll have updates and hopefully provide timely updates as things change over the summer. So be sure to check that out. And you can always reach out to us at Whitebark directly as well. We have a contact form and our emails up on the website as well. Before we go, I just want to see if any of our partners want to have any final words before we close off a little bit early tonight. All right. Okay, with that, I will close this meeting. Thank you all so much for joining. And if you want to come to a field portion, we will have one on Monday next week at 5:30 at Redford Bluff Street. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.